The Topkapi Palace. For centuries, travelers from the West have approached it from the sea. The palace of the Sultan, commander of the faithful, the nerve center of the Ottoman Empire. Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, three names for the same city. It is a view of such strange beauty, wrote Théophile Gautier, as to cause one to doubt its reality. An oasis of courtyards and gardens spring from this enigmatic fortress, recalling the nomadic camps from which it came. The Ottoman Empire was a thorn in the west side for 400 years. The Turks were said to be cruel. They had conquered everywhere from North Africa to the Balkans, from Asia Minor to Arabia. Yet emissaries sent here from the West were more intrigued by this great power's refinement, by the strangeness of its protocols and customs. This is why, even today, tourists coming to the Topkapi expect to delve into some sort of mystery. Their questions about the site have not changed in centuries.
Also ich habe Reisegruppen hier regelmäßig in die Türkei. Und
I regularly guide
das
tour
meiste
groups around
konzentriert sich auf
Turkey,
Istanbul.
most of the
Und,
time in
wie gesagt, die
Istanbul.
Leute sind
People
sehr, sehr
rave about the
begeistert
richness
von
of the
der
sights in
Breite
Turkey.
an Kulturdenkmälern hier in der Türkei. Sie lieben diese Stadt. Am Anfang sind sie ein wenig
They adore this town.
crowded.
At first they're a bit surprised by the swarming crowd, but they're soon won over by the hospitality
der
of the
Türken hier,
Turks.
die Leute begeistert. Und
C'est bizarre de retrouver tout ce qu'on a chez nous ici.
It's weird finding all these things we have back home, things we assume to be Palestinian. Now I realize that they're in fact Turkish.
Je ne savais pas que c'était une résidence impériale aussi grande.
I didn't realize it was
Quand
such a
notre
huge
guide nous a parlé de
imperial residence.
70
Our
hectares.
guide told us that there are 70 hectares,
avec
and
la
that each sultan added another small
sultan
palace when he
revenait
returned
de
from a
campagne
campaign.
faisait un petit palais.
The most
Bon, le
imposing
plus
and the most
imposant et
recent
le
is the
plus récent
Topkapi.
étant Topkapi.
I'd only ever seen the view from the Bosphorus.
Je n'en voyais que l'image par
It
rapport au
really is
passeport.
very impressive.
Donc, mais c'est vraiment impressionnant.
Without knowing it, these tourists are breaking a taboo. In the past, only the Sultan and his escort were allowed to walk through the door of felicity into the second courtyard. Beyond that began the prince's private palace with his own apartments, library, and harem. The Sultan would hold audiences in the throne room. Visitors would be escorted to the sovereign by his janissaries, the Ottoman army's famous foot soldiers, Christian captives originally who had been converted to Islam. The Sultan would whisper his orders while everyone else maintained absolute silence. The Topkapi was also a training ground for the elite of the empire. It had its own pages' school, where future viziers or governors learned how to serve their sovereign. All of this was in accordance with the wishes of Mehmet II, conqueror of Constantinople and the first to build the Topkapi Palace in the 15th century. The most famous of his successors, Suleiman the Magnificent, brought his harem into the palace in 1560. Until then, it had been located lower down in Istanbul. From that time on, the Topkapi protected its secrets even better than ever. This man's name is Stefan Gerasimos. Architect, historian, and researcher, he's known every nook and cranny of the palace since he was a young man. He is our guide to the secret history of the Topkapi.
Oui, je suis né à Istanbul. J'ai fait mes études là-bas, y compris des
Yes, I was born in Istanbul.
architecture.
I went to school here and to the university to study architecture. It was while I was studying architecture that, as part of a training program, I ended up by chance in the Topkapi. I've always been interested in history, and I was delighted to find myself part of a great team of architects and restorers who at that time were tackling the harem. It wasn't open then, hadn't even been completely explored. So for 2 years, 2 summers rather, I took part in the first restoration of the Topkapi harem. I was walking in the garden by the pond in the closed part of the palace, and lying down on the ground, I saw a stone floor under the dust, which all of a sudden came to an end. I found an intriguing little ledge and dug a little with my fingers. I saw that the ledge continued, so I asked the chief architect to come and have a look. Labourers were sent to work on it, and we discovered a huge open-air pond, which was the prolongation of the pond inside the palace. The water here isn't even 4 foot deep. Not enough to drown in.
Lira italiana, Palazzo Topkapi Istanbul, libro italiano.
10 lira italiano, 10 lira italiano.
Today, the ever-increasing numbers of tourists around the first courtyard are met by official guides. They have a reputation for competence. They are certainly picturesque. Some of them are ex-teachers, others are mostly self-taught. Of all these guides, David Gormazzano, nicknamed the Little Sultan by his peers, is the most voluble.
If you'd like to be guided, you can take me up. I'll show you what a guided visit is.
His inimitable spiel, delivered in both French and Spanish, is famous all around Sarajevo. Only men at seconds allowed through this gate on horseback. Today, everyone bustles forward on foot towards the security gates. This is the only part of the palace where security measures are obvious. Elsewhere, even in rooms housing the most precious collections, the Topkapi displays the greatest discretion. But don't be fooled. First opened to the public in 1924, the Topkapi is a very well-protected museum, with some areas totally inaccessible, even to our cameras.
After the harem, we'll see a part of the kitchen too. And then the fourth courtyard. That's the private section. The postcard sellers have very ancient postcards showing the women coming out of the harem to bathe in the pool. Don't forget that the area you can see here is a private. Passing by that, we'll see the kitchens. At 1:45 they start to sell the tickets. I don't like queuing, I'm respected, so I get the ticket straight from the window. So we'll see the harem and then go straight to the treasure. If you have time, come along with me, okay? Let's go. I'm a widower, so staying at home for an old man, that's too much for me. Work, and I which works does right. And I'm not young. That's why, instead of staying in the house, as I'm a widower and haven't got one, I've got married daughters, and they have their own families. That's why I come here, to have fun, not to work, to have fun. In Christianity, they say that Christ is the Son of God, the ambassador and the Son. We're in the first courtyard. And today, we will pass through many doors. The imperial door. Next, you're going to go through the door of salutation. And now we're going to go on through the door of felicity.
Never would the sultans of the Ottoman Empire have believed that one day a woman would rule over the Topkapi. Phyllis Kagman is the palace director. She supervises her staff of over 150 with an iron hand.
Santral cihazlarının uzağında boştaki yere taşıtırıyor.
Et Phyllis,
How did you meet
comment vous
Phyllis?
l'avez rencontrée? Alors, Phyllis, moi, quand
When I came here as a young architecture student in the summer of 1965,
un peu un
Phyllis was a trainee in the library. That's when we met.
à la bibliothèque. Alors,
And I showed
c'est
Phyllis
venu à ce
around.
point-là.
I dare say that. Yes, I showed her around because she knew the library, but not necessarily the harem or other parts, our discoveries in the
On
harem.
connaissait pas forcément l'ensemble du harem, les différents endroits et nos découvertes du harem.
She took me to the library and we leafed through the Topkapi's most precious manuscripts.
J'étais, c'est pas
That, in fact, was the only time in my life that I've seen those precious pictures so close up.
où j'ai pu regarder de très près ces précieuses images. Alors, Phyllis,
So Phyllis
fait
made her
carrière
career in the
dans la
library. She was
bibliothèque,
promoted
a monté en grade.
and put in charge of the library and stayed there until becoming overall director 4 years ago, I think.
Jusqu'à devenir directrice il y a maintenant 4 ans, je crois.
The daily average is 7,000 visitors. Sometimes it goes up to 10 or 12, even 15,000. The fewest is 3,000. But we still get large numbers, even in winter.
Kışın da bazı günler çok kalabalık olabiliyor.
Yazık bir sanayi diyor.
Tabii. O zaman da yani
For this year, we can make a forecast of somewhere between 2.5, 3 million visitors.
On est devant la salle du trône.
We're in front of the throne room,
Entre
which was obviously the power center of this empire, which lasted for almost 7 centuries.
près de 7 siècles.
In the beginning, it was just a small principality in Anatolia,
Principauté,
in the west of Anatolia, one principality among others.
principauté parmi
There were a dozen Turkish or
principautés
Turkmen principalities in Asia Minor.
en Asie mineure.
This one just had the good fortune,
chance
perhaps, to be facing
Peut-être se
Byzantium.
trouver face aux Byzantins.
Every year during the summer, the inhabitants of Istanbul would hurry to the Topkapi so as not to miss a unique spectacle. The Ottoman army setting off once again on campaign. Messengers would rush to the far ends of the empire to warn the enemy that the Turks were coming. With Suleiman at their head, they took the holy cities. From that point on, the Janissaries, in the name of the Prophet, forced Europe to negotiate for their share of the known world. It was a fearsome, disciplined and well-paid army equipped early on with arquebuses and modern-style cannon. Even before Suleiman, Mehmed II had already reopened the shipping routes. The Ottoman fleet was enough of a match for the Venetians, for the Doge's proud city to have no choice but to make a pact.
Donc nous sommes en face de l'entrée du Bosphore.
So here we are at the
Nous,
entrance
la côte
into
nord
the
à droite et
Bosphorus.
la mer ouverte,
The Bosphorus
à ma
is
gauche.
behind us there to
Et
the right,
c'est l'endroit qu'on appelle
and
la
the open
pointe
sea to the
sidérale,
left.
parce que le palais y
This
est.
spot is called Seraglio Point because the palace
C'est
is
le
right
bout de
here.
la ville intramuros.
It's the edge of
des murailles
walled
maritimes.
town with its Byzantine sea walls.
C'est l'endroit où la ville
This
antique a
is the
été
spot on
fondée.
which the ancient city was founded in the 6th century
Et puis
BC.
Mehmed II construisit
Mehmed
en
II
face un
built a
fort
much greater fort
quelques
facing
mois avant la conquête
several
de
months before the
Constantinople
taking of
pour
Constantinople,
intercepter avec les canons
and
qui
used
viennent
his
d'être
newly invented
inventés
cannon to
le
intercept
passage
passing
de
ships,
navires
to stop
pour
trading
empêcher
or warships
que
passing without his
de
authorization.
commerce, de guerre passe sans son autorisation. Et ça a été efficace.
Did the fort do its job?
Le
In
fortin, en
fact, the
réalité, n'a pas
fort
beaucoup
wasn't
servi.
used
N'a pas
much
beaucoup
because
servi.
a few months later
Après,
Constantinople was taken.
a construit
From
un
then on,
fort.
the Ottomans
Et
controlled the whole
ensuite, les Ottomans ont
territory,
contrôlé
from the Black Sea to the
territoire de
Aegean,
la mer Noire à la mer Égée.
which meant that there was no other force
Temps
capable
pour
of crossing the
traverser
Bosphorus
le
until
Bosphore
the 19th
au
century.
9e siècle. Gel de yaşa, gel de yaşa.
The palace suffers from the ravages of time, and roofers are constantly at work repairing the damage. Techniques haven't changed at all. Selim and his mates lay down sheets of lead just as the workers in the 15th century did. Selim's father, too, spent his working life maintaining the thousands of square meters of the Topkapi's roofs.
Katalizör mühendisi. Serbest
It's a job that gets passed down from father to son. We get to work on the Topkapi, the Topkapi Palace, Santa Sofia Church, and also in the towns of Edirne, Simili, and Bursa. I have a small family business which provides me with work throughout the whole of Turkey. This tool is a mantikwa. It's used for flattening and folding the lead. This one is a tomak. You use it like a hammer. And this is a special knife for cutting lead. The end is completely curved round. It's a lead knife.
This morning, Selim is changing the roofing over the kitchens. Everyone in the palace is familiar with these cupolas and chimneys. They were the work of Sinan, Suleiman the Magnificent's architect. Sinan was a Christian press-ganged into the ranks of the Janissaries. While on campaign, this builder of innate talent learnt all the construction methods of the countries they passed through. He soon became indispensable to the Sultan. In Istanbul, he was responsible for Suleiman's mosque, for the water conveyance systems, and for the aqueducts.
I'm not very photogenic. To cook, they had to use whole tree trunks. Use your imagination. They put one next to the other. They put in these windows. Look, that's Ottoman art. But there were no chimneys, so the smoke went out by the windows. But the flames ravaged through the kitchen. This is why they called on Sinan. Sinan, good Lord, there's no kitchen, and there are 5,000 people to feed. Come and restore everything. He was young, proud, and he said to them, I'll restore it, but you must leave me alone. I'm going to put in chimneys. Come on. Look at the chimneys. They were put in the 16th century.
Down the centuries, Sinan has exerted an influence on many Western architects. Even Le Corbusier drew inspiration from the famous cupolas of the Topkapi kitchens.
The kitchens. We have the kitchen records, and we know, almost to the last grain, all the ingredients bought every year, and even sometimes every month, by the palace. From the quantities of the ingredients and an estimation of the numbers of calories consumed on a daily basis, we can calculate the number of people living in the palace. So, at the beginning of Mehmet II's reign, there were from 3,000 to 4,000 people fed in the palace. With the addition of the harem at the end of the 16th century, the number's more likely to be 7,000 to 8,000. And we exceed 11,000 people in the middle of the 17th century.
Usually thought of as conquering generals, the sultans took as much care developing trade. It took a whole year for caravans, sometimes numbering several hundred camels, to bring treasures back from China. For a long time, Istanbul was one of the last stops on the Silk Road. The Ottomans imported cloth, paper, spices, and porcelain, the manufacturing secrets of which were jealously guarded by the Chinese.
Look at this one. We'll do a test.
Istanbul was the gateway to Europe. Greek, Jewish, Egyptian, and Armenian warehouses stretching from the port by the Topkapi and the bazaar under the palace attracting influential Venetian and Genoese traders.
We're in a part of the Great Bazaar dating from the time of Mehmet II. This is one of the two main hubs of the Great Bazaar. This is where cloth of the highest quality was sold. It's called the Bedestin, the hub around which the shops are laid out. Sir, you want to look at the carpets? Come here, sir. I'll show you a flying carpet. Come on. Look. All colors. Come here, sir.
Sì, volevo tapivolo, vieni.
İnsanları atacağım. Ben insanları tek hesaba çekilecek. Aldıklarımızdan, sattıklarımızdan. Ha, çek bakalım, çek. Tabii dedi. Çek. Allah'a hesap vereceğiz. O hesap gününe hazır mı?
The same gestures passed down through the centuries, the same shouts from one stall to another, the same touting for business in every language. The bazaar has changed little. Cars are not allowed, and everyone working here seems to be part of the same age-old spectacle. The Sultan's first mosques were simply the barely transformed old Christian churches of Byzantium. Muslims from Mecca to Baghdad swore religious allegiance to the Ottoman sovereigns, and Istanbul was proclaimed the first city of the Prophet. Yet minorities were still accorded freedom of worship here. Here, under the Blue Mosque, Islam has long enjoyed a tradition of tolerance, well suited to the people of Istanbul themselves. Today, the echo of this religious unity can still be heard in and around the palace. The Topkapi calls to mind Notre Dame Cathedral and its beggars. The atmosphere here is good-natured, with a small nation of people looking after the palace. They provide a gentler image of an empire which wasn't always so. Nuray sells spinning tops. She's originally from Diyarbakir, a village far from here in Kurdistan.
Some soldiers made us leave. They didn't want us to stay. My father wishes we'd stayed there now. The French used to buy my tops, but now it's Americans.
Bigote natural, no.
Sí. Y el cuello, todo.
Ali allows people to touch his moustache for good luck, just as Quasimodo would let people tap his hump.
Vamos a pagar dinero un poco, donaciones.
Los bigotes. Y yo no he visto un bigote en toda mi puñetera vida. De cuerno más que un par de bigotes.
Yallah.
Vamos, venga.
There are two Topkapis, Topkapi the museum and Topkapi the village.
Topkapi Palace? In the old days, the Sultans used to live in the Topkapi Palace. The holy relics of the Prophet Muhammad there. Swords, footprints, hair from his beard and stuff like that. They're Greek priests in the Saint Sophia Church. It's all to do with history, things which happened in the past. And people come here to see it and to take photos which they can take home with them.
The Quran, which is the holy book, and the Gospels and the Bible order you to respect all the prophets of the past, even before Jesus. Since this was so, with the fort here being the strongest of all, they began to import everything religious here. That's how the religious relic was started.
Suleiman brought the Prophet's footprint back from Egypt. For tourists of all religions, these relics are part of the Topkapi's artistic legacy. But for Muslims, especially for these youngsters on their circumcision day, the Topkapi is one stage of their pilgrimage. It's the symbol of a living, contemporary religion which is present throughout the whole of Istanbul.
Teşekkür ediyoruz. Bye.
Topkapı Sarayı benim için iki şey.
For me,
iki önemli
the
şey
Topkapi
ifade
Palace means
ediyor.
two things.
Bunların
First
başında
and foremost,
Osmanlı
it bears witness to the history of the Ottomans,
hanedanı ve
the
Osmanlı
Ottoman sovereigns and their way of life.
ifade ediyor. Birincisi.
But the palace
İkincisi
also
de
recounts
kendi
my own
yaşamını
life,
ifade ediyor. Çünkü
because I've
ben
been working here for
37
37
çalışıyorum.
years.
On Tuesdays, the Topkapi is closed for cleaning. Only in exceptional cases are visits allowed on this day. Under the eagle eye of Phyllis, the ever-watchful director, the staff clean the parts of the palace frequented by the tourists.
In fact, before we can open certain exhibitions, there's plenty of work to be completed. The whole palace needs redecorating, and we've undertaken a project with the City University for restoring all the earthenware.
Sibel is restorer of historic monuments.
Ben Topkapı Sarayı'na bağlı olarak çalışıyorum. 4 senedir
I've been working on the Topkapi Palace for 4 years.
geldiğim günden beri Çin'e restorasyon.
Since first coming here, I've been working on the restoration of the ceramics.
İlk önce biz bu
When I
çalışmaya
began this job here, we drew up a graphic inventory of the ceramics, section by section.
bölüm bölüm burada ne kadar
Give them all a number, identify them, and take a photograph of each piece so that we can check the before against the after.
fotoğraflarla her çalışmanın her aşamasında fotoğraf çekiyoruz.
The resulting documentation with the numbers and characteristics goes to the archives.
Ve üzerinde belgelendirdiğimiz çinileri arşive kaldı.
It's an analysis job, which could come in useful, for example, after an earthquake.
Deprem sırasında yıkılma olabilir. Yani bir tespit
We make
çalışması
full-scale
var.
copies of the earthenware on
Şekilde
paper,
desenleri
and we're also touching up the colors.
birebir ölçüleri
So at one and the same time, we have a whole series of tasks going on: copying, archiving, and restoration.
Proje çalışması ve uygulama çalışması.
Osmanlı kültürüne yeni dönüş, yeni bir ilim olduğundan
Is there a renewed interest in Ottoman culture?
gerekir mi?
Sadece Osmanlı
Not only in Ottoman culture, in my opinion,
tarihi korumak
there's an interest in preserving the works of the past in general,
edilebilir.
as far as the art are concerned anyway.
Bu söylenebilir.
So what's a man doing here, surrounded by all these
Bunlar
women?
arasında tek başına bir adam olarak ne yapıyor?
Well,
Yani bu kadın
you know, I don't think it's really got
erkekler
anything to
olayı
do
değil.
with
Gerçekten
whether you're a man
sevmeniz
or
gerekiyor
a
ki
woman.
bu işi yapabilirsiniz.
You see, to do this
Ben
job,
2 senedir çalışıyorum.
you really have to love it.
Gerçekten inanılmaz bir
Myself, I've been
özveride
working here for
bulunuyorsunuz bu
about
iş için.
2 years.
Gerçekten.
And you know,
Yani bunun
you really have to give
bayan
100%
ya da
to this job.
erkek
And I don't think it's got anything to do with
olmadığını
what sex you are.
düşünüyorum.
So they're all doing the same work.
Tabii.
Yeah, and where does that come from?
Bunlar ilk
From Iznik.
resimleri.
It's from the 16th century.
Atölyeler var.
There used to be famous ceramic workshops there.
Gelip ona birkaç yer söylersen iyi olur.
A paradox of modern Turkey, women are now called on to protect the architectural legacy of an Ottoman Empire which imposed the idea of male supremacy.
Ama doğru söylüyorum. Ben sabah gördüm 11-10 vardı.
But Sibel and the other women in the group don't bear a grudge. Selim has only just come to Istanbul. He sells sesame bread rolls known as simits.
Biraz bot kaldım. Bir sene gene okula gittim yine bıraktım geldim.
Can I make a picture from you?
Yeah. It's good. Yes?
Onlardan fazla para alma yalnız. Bak ya. Onlara yalan söylüyorsun. 200 bin lira, 500 bin lira değil.
Yok.
Onlardan fazla para alma. Ya yapma.
Kaç tane alacak abi ona?
Qu'est-ce qu'il dit? Qu'est-ce que tu lui dis là?
Il a demandé
I asked
écoute, elle a
him
dit
how much
500
they
000.
cost.
Oui, donc c'est 200
Kaç
000.
tane abi söyle?
Ben oui, mais il faut qu'il gagne sa vie.
Well, he has to
Pourquoi
earn
il
a
va faire de
living.
la police?
Niye polisten
But why are you afraid of the police?
The police arrest us, take us to the police station, and tell us we're not allowed to come here.
Buraya gelmek yasak mı?
Where do they take you?
Alıp sizi nereye götürüyor?
Karakola git.
To the police
Sen
station.
hafta 2 gün
Last week, I ended up there for 2 days.
Olmazsa biz kendimize rahat satarız ama polis geldi mi onu. Tamam. Polis atamam. Şaraplık niye var?
The arrival of the police interrupts the sale of the bread rolls. Selim and his companion have to sneak off. These chases are a daily ritual, almost a game. Even if he was caught, Selim, who was originally from the same village as Nuray, the spinning top girl, would soon be back.
Ben nasıl geldim?
The day I first got here, I came straight to the Sultanahmet area.
Ben
There were no police around then.
Sultanımı satıyordum.
Just walking around, I could sell 100 simit a day.
Smitstiye dansarek, smitstiye viret. Yeni geldi. Aldıçtır smitstiye viret. Yeni geldi. İşte. Hadi simit yeni geldi.
I've been sticking close to the Topkapi for 2 or 3 weeks now.
Legend has it that in the 16th century a Venetian merchant had his head chopped off when he was caught looking at the harem through a telescope. It's probably nothing more than a legend. Many are the tall tales regarding the palace and the women once sequestered there. The harem is, of course, the most visited part of the Topkapi.
Bah là, on va visiter le harem.
We're going to visit the harem next.
Un peu.
I've got no idea
Bah,
what
je
it's
sais pas du
like.
tout comment c'est. Je crois que c'est. Il y a
I
énormément
think
de mosaïques.
there's loads of mosaics and gold stuff, but I
Je sais
don't
pas
know
plus, quoi.
more than that.
C'est intriguant parce que le harem, c'est quand même
Intriguing, a harem.
assez mythique.
It's quite a mythical, mysterious place. Beautiful, magnificent. You can feel the past. Although it isn't part of our own culture, it's a fascinating place. Its history, its beauty.
Oui, et surtout essayer d'imaginer. Je pensais que
trying to
j'arriverais à
imagine
me mettre à un endroit, dans une pièce,
I was sort of hoping to be able to find a spot,
et à me remettre un petit peu dans l'ambiance
imagining the atmosphere in the 15th and 16th
siècle,
century,
à la période de Soliman le
thinking of the time of Suleiman the Magnificent,
Magnifique.
when the harem was full of women,
Le harem était rempli.
and these buildings were full
Ces
of life.
bâtiments vivaient en quelque sorte. Hein.
Serving as the women's quarters and the Sultan's own private sanctuary, the harem was a secret world turned in on itself. For the Ottomans, removing women from the outside world was doing them a great honor. Two young French women, Claire and Marion, are accorded the privilege of accompanying Stefan Gerasimos into apartments and chambers off limits to most tourists. Lady Mary Montague, the wife of the English ambassador to Istanbul in the 18th century, remarked that with its bars, doors and walled-in courtyards, the harem closely resembled a convent. The same rules as governed the rest of the palace were enforced here. The harem was, first and foremost, a sort of boarding school for girls, where they were taught good manners and received religious instruction. Black eunuchs guarded the corridors, and the female slaves of the Sultan's wives worked in the dormitories.
We're in the vestibule of the harem. This is as far as the black eunuchs guarding the harem could go. They didn't go inside the harem itself.
Cevre gelir miydi hayale?
Il y a un grand incendie qui...
There was a great fire which destroyed the harem in 1664.
Et puis
After that, it was rebuilt.
les céramiques.
The ceramics, the most precious Iznik ceramics, with that famous tomato red, are from the 16th century. After that, they lost the technique. The red went yellow or brown. Modern-day factories are just recently managing to reproduce that red, but they still can't match the perfection of the old ceramics. The red always stands out just a little. Another interesting thing is the fountain with the running water. The noise of the water creates a nice atmosphere.
And perhaps it would have covered up the noise of the Sultan's frolics.
Oh, perhaps that too, yes. But on the other hand, there were no ears around to eavesdrop.
Pas d'oreilles dorées indiscrètes pour les écouter.
And yet 4 pages would watch over the Sultan as he slept in his room, which opened directly onto the hammam, or steam bath.
A change of rooms then. Here the floor's all marble, and we're in the toilet suite.
Even in the bath, there were bars to protect the Sultan from any attempts at assassination. Suleiman was the only Sultan to wed an ex-slave. Roxelane climbed to the very top of the extremely complex harem hierarchy. From that point on, people began to talk about the power of women, and even in the 18th century about a female sultanate. So numerous were the intrigues and quarrels within these silent walls.
Here we're in the later parts of the 18th century harem, where the sultans were being increasingly influenced by European Baroque.
Inspiré par le baroque européen, il y a peut-être...
There might also have been European craftsmen working here.
C'est pas évident.
It's not clear.
Ils se
But
construisent
they added rooms in the Baroque style, which is known as Ottoman Baroque or Ottoman Rococo.
Ottoman, le rococo ottoman. C'est un...
This is one of the first rooms in that style, built by Abdul Hamid I, who reigned from 1774 to 1789. He died the year of the French Revolution. And then in the 18th century, the harem got overpopulated. The old women carried on living here, so the interior was subdivided and lived in. Those are extra ceilings which were put in. That meant there were more floors with cells or apartments for them to live in. Those elements have remained? Yes, they're elements which are added on over the centuries. This is an imperial box with an unbeatable view of the swimming pool. It's well fitted out with a cupola, paintings and ceramics. From here the Sultan could watch over the whole pool and see his favourites at play, no doubt. We can imagine women swimming there and the Sultan throwing in gold coins. Well, we have no descriptions of any of that, but it seems plausible enough.
On peut imaginer des choses plus ou moins plausibles.
Misconceptions regarding the harem linger on. Visitors are unwilling to relinquish their fantasies of this place as a pleasure palace. Such beliefs are well entrenched in the Western mind, thanks to Orientalist painters in particular. The end of the tour. Last photos, last souvenirs. The tourists return to the blinding light of midday from the Bosphorus at the limit of Seraglio Point. The impression of wandering through a tempestuous period of history slowly wears off. It's time to eat and prepare to confront the Turkey of today. Down below, the modern-day caravans pass by. Most of them, like this tanker, are transporting oil, black gold, a precious commodity unknown to the Ottomans.
Onların kapaklarına bir şey örteceğiz, bağlayacağız, etiket yapıştıracağız. Renk de olabilir, karışık da olur.
Like a sultan herself with all her powers, Phyllis has spent her entire career taking care of the Topkapi. She spends her life here, even sleeps here, and rarely leaves. She's the palace's last prisoner.
Resmi olarak adı müdürlük.
Officially, I'm the director of the
Topkapi
Topkapi.
Sarayı'nın müdürüyüm. Hemen hemen
Year in, year out,
türlü işi
I supervise all the activities on
var.
the site,
Güvenlikle ilgili şeyleri
and I pay particular attention to
yakın
security
takip
matters.
ediyorum. Önceliği
That's what
ona
my daily
veriyorum.
work
Her
consists
zaman,
of.
yani günlük işimde. Daha düzünüz mü bunun şeyi?
Have you turned the heating down?
No, but at night, with the spotlights, the temperature always goes up.
Her şey hem binaların
Previous design in here was 30 years old.
kavramsız,
It's all a
mekan-
question of distributing the space.
Bina 1460'da.
The building dates back to 1460,
O
and at that
zaman
time, there was no need to put
böyle
windows in
küçüklerle
and disfigure it.
bitmez hale getirmenin bir manası yok bu
That's what
mekanda.
we had to take into consideration.
Onun algılanması ister.
Also, the space had to be
İkincisi de
made
en
safe
önemli
against
tarafı da
earthquakes.
depreme karşı korunaklı olması isterdi. Onun
That's why the works of
Wow.
art are placed in niches
Kesinlikle
within the
gerekli.
thickness of the walls. We've added windows made of unbreakable glass and steel as well.
kırılmaz camı. Topkapı hançeri o
The
movie
dagger you
star.
see over there is our movie star.
o. Evet.
Tekon üstü.
Hediyelerle beraber geri dönüyorlar. Sonra bu hançerin bu kadar ünlenmesinin sebebi 1960 galiba tam filmin tarihini
This is a very famous dagger.
60'ların başında Melin Amerika
Around 1960, I can't remember the date exactly, Jules Dassin directed his film Topkapi with the actress
bu hançer
Melina Mercury.
bir Amerikan filmine konu olması da onun şöhret yapıyor.
You could say, in fact, this dagger was the
Şöhretini
Topkapi's
ona
contribution to
borçlu.
cinema.
Sinemaya borç.
Je m'en souviens encore de
I still remember
ma
it.
première
It
expérience.
was one of my first experiences here in 1965 or 66.
Vieux monsieur déjà.
At the time, the director was this charming old man who used to tell us all the stories about the Topkapi.
Et à l'époque,
And it was at about that time that the famous film Topkapi was made. It was all about this rather fantastic burglary with this person coming down from the sky and getting past the extremely sophisticated security system and alarm in order to steal the great dagger.
Avec une alarme sophistiquée, ce qui faisait bien rigoler le...
This gave the director a really good laugh.
Et
He said to me, "We don't have an alarm system. We have 2 security guards who do the rounds during the summer, but they're so afraid of ghosts that if they hear a noise, they go and hide." That's what the Topkapi was like in 1965. It's not like that anymore, of course, but it was when the film came out.
The Ottoman Empire took great pains to rival the West. Its aim was to fascinate Europe. To this end, it flaunted a luxuriousness unequaled even by the most extravagant European courts. Its treasure was an expression of its power. In the empire, as among the nomadic people from which it grew, anything portable was covered in gold and precious stones and displayed to all comers. The Topkapi, then, was a huge workshop of art and culture. The Sultans surrounded themselves with the finest goldsmiths, painters, bookbinders, weavers, and miniaturists. Suleiman himself was an excellent clockmaker. Istanbul was spoken of as the most refined of cities. The legends of its treasures have passed down through the centuries, like the story of the precious stone which was found by chance and exchanged for 3 spoons. It is, in fact, the largest diamond in the world. The empire's armies went off to war accompanied by music. All rituals, even the most mundane, were thus enlivened. The musicians would play every Tuesday, for example, when the Sultan was being shaved. Lost when Turkey became a republic, the ancient scores have now been pieced back together, and the Ottoman sound has been restored.
The music was a bit of an adventure. The idea was to try to play the ancient Ottoman music as it used to be played in the Topkapi. The palace had its own musicians. The idea was to use the ancient manuscripts and do a recording in the museum. We did it in the Council of Ministers' secretary's room. Why there? Because it's a room with excellent acoustics. The secretaries would sit in there, could hear what was happening next door, and would write down all that was said. So we were in the room with the best acoustics in the palace. It's perfect from an acoustic point of view, except that the trees were full of crows cawing. I ran out into the garden shaking a coat to shoo off the crows, and they'd fly off, we'd record a piece, and they'd come back, and that went on all day long. There are fewer crows now, perhaps because it's summer. There was a group of about 10 musicians, including Fikret Karakaya, a friend of mine, who started working on this 16th and 17th century music. By studying the miniatures and the written sources, I was able to make out the shapes and dimensions of the ancient musical instruments. Listen, the sound lasts, resonates for a long, long time.
Hala devam ediyor ses. Evet.
We've rediscovered the timbre of these instruments.
This music will always give the inhabitants of Istanbul a natural link to their past. Over the last few years, the local people have gradually been finding their way back to the Topkapi. This is as it should be. Even if the people of Istanbul are not aware of it, they owe a lot to the Sultans, the atmosphere of their city, so different from others in Turkey. Its cosmopolitan feel, its multicolored streets, its busy port. Here, people will always be a little European, a little Eastern, a little Turk, no matter their place of origin. They are, before all else, at the crossroads of several worlds. The Topkapi Palace, forgotten by the tourists, slips back into the mists of time.
Aman, aman, rast geldi mi ki cane, bir al giymiş biri mavili. Al gel aldı aklım ama, ille mavili, mavili. Gel, gel, gel, gel, gel, gel. Aman, aman, al giyeni alsam yanıma, mor giyeni sarsam sineme. Beyazla da çok güzel ama ille mavi.